There are moments in life when the ordinary world flickers, and for a brief instant, you sense that something vast and invisible is humming beneath the surface. Perhaps it happens when you stand alone beneath a star-filled sky, the silence pressing against you like a cathedral of infinity. Perhaps it comes when you notice the way patterns repeats the spirals of a seashell echoing the whirls of a galaxy, the branching of trees mirrored in the flow of rivers and the lightning of storms. These moments are not accidents. They are cracks in the veil, hints of a deeper design, what might be called the hidden architecture of reality. For most of us, reality is presented as a finished stage set. We are told that what we see is all there is, that the world is a fixed arrangement of objects and rules, measurable and defined by science, culture, and history. We are trained to live within this framework, to measure our lives against it, and to rarely, if ever, question its foundations. Yet beneath that constructed facade lies a more intricate scaffolding, one that has always been there, unacknowledged by the masses, yet quietly shaping every experience, every perception, every possibility. They never told you, because perhaps they themselves never knew, or perhaps because to reveal such a structure would dismantle the illusions that keep civilization neatly in place. The hidden architecture of reality is not a building you can step into, nor a blueprint you can hold in your hand. It is more like the pulse beneath the skin of the universe, the invisible geometry from which the visible world emerges. It is woven of laws and patterns, but also of consciousness and meaning, as though the universe is less a machine and more a living text waiting to be read. To glimpse it is to realize that the walls of what we call reality are not solid but permeable, not final but provisional, shifting according to the awareness that perceives them. Think of it this way: most people live as though the world is a house with locked doors. They believe only the front entrance exists, and so they spend their lives walking in and out through the same threshold, never questioning if other passages, secret staircases, or hidden rooms might exist. Yet the architecture of reality is not confined to this one hallway. It has wings and chambers that few have dared to explore, dimensions folded within dimensions, connections that make the ordinary extraordinary once seen. To awaken to this is to realize you have been living in a fraction of the house, mistaking it for the whole. But why does this matter? Why should anyone care about these veiled structures and unspoken truths? Because to remain unaware is to live at the mercy of illusions. It is to mistake shadows for substance, to confuse the surface with the depth. Entire societies are built on this misunderstanding, and individuals suffer because of it, believing they are powerless when in fact they are participants in the very weaving of reality. To see the hidden architecture is not merely to satisfy curiosity, it is to reclaim a birthright of awareness, a recognition that life is not happening to you in blind randomness, but through patterns that can be engaged with, learned from, and even shaped. Of course, such revelations are not new. Mystics, philosophers, poets, and visionaries have all, in their own ways, whispered of this architecture. They spoke of it in metaphors of divine order, sacred geometry, universal law, or cosmic harmony. They glimpsed that beneath the apparent chaos of life there was symmetry, beneath suffering there was purpose, beneath the mundane there was wonder. Yet in the rush of modern life, with its obsession with immediacy and control, such whispers are drowned out. We are taught to dismiss them as romantic illusions, rather than invitations to explore. Still, the architecture remains. It does not demand belief. It waits in silence, etched into every grain of sand, encoded in the rhythm of breath, and mirrored in the rise and fall of civilizations. It is there in the way opposites dance, light and shadow, order and chaos, birth and death, always balancing, always pointing to an unseen axis around which the visible world turns. To understand this hidden structure is not to escape reality, but to finally step into it, with eyes wide open. Imagine for a moment that your life is a story written across the pages of time. You believe you are simply a character moving through it, reacting to events beyond your control. But what if you are also the co-author, unconsciously shaping the very narrative you live? What if reality itself bends and curves around the framework of your attention, your choices, your beliefs? Suddenly, the hidden architecture is no longer abstract. It becomes the most intimate truth that the scaffolding of the cosmos is not separate from you but runs through you. That to awaken to it is to awaken to your own role as both witness and creator. This is not an easy realization. To glimpse the architecture is to also confront unsettling questions. If reality has hidden layers, who benefits from keeping them hidden? If perception shapes reality, then how much of what you experience is truly yours, and how much has been engineered by culture, authority, or fear? And if the structure of life is more fluid than fixed, then the limits you have accepted about your potential, your freedom, your destiny may not be limits at all, but walls drawn in chalk, erasable the moment you dare to rub them away. Thus, the exploration of the hidden architecture of reality is not only a philosophical journey, but a profoundly personal one. It calls you to step beyond passivity, to no longer take the surface world at face value, and to engage with the deeper currents shaping your existence. It invites you to see your struggles not as meaningless suffering, but as puzzles designed to teach. It invites you to see beauty not as decoration, but as evidence of underlying order. And it invites you to see yourself not as a powerless fragment, but as an inseparable thread in the vast weaving of the cosmos. So, let us begin this journey together. Through the layered halls of the unseen structure that holds everything you know, let us peel back the curtain, not to escape the world, but to finally see it as it is alive, interconnected, and infinitely more mysterious than anyone ever told you. What waits beyond is not just knowledge, but transformation. For to understand the hidden architecture of reality is to never live blindly again. To begin to see the hidden architecture of reality, one must first unlearn the notion that reality is flat, singular, and absolute. The surface of life convinces us that the world is made of fixed shapes and rigid laws, that cause and effect are linear, that beginnings and endings are cleanly marked, yet beneath this apparent solidity lies a subtler framework, one that is neither flat nor fixed but endlessly layered, woven with patterns that repeat themselves at every scale. The hidden architecture is not a single blueprint, but a living geometry, shifting and breathing, endlessly mirroring itself in spirals, cycles, and rhythms that tie the smallest particle to the sweep of galaxies. One of the central themes is the interplay between illusion and truth. What we call reality is not the full measure of existence, but rather a filtered perception, shaped by senses, beliefs, and cultural narratives. Our eyes show us only a sliver of the light spectrum. Our ears catch only a fraction of sound, and our minds edit everything into a version we can manage. What is left out, what we cannot see, hear, or can see forms the vast majority of reality. To live without acknowledging this is to confuse the surface ripples of a lake. For the lake itself, the architecture reminds us that the visible is only a veil, a thin surface stretched over depths we rarely touch. Another pillar is the principle of interconnectedness. The architecture is not built like a stack of bricks, with each piece isolated and separate, but like a web where every strand vibrates in response to the others. In this design, no action is without echo, no thought without consequence. The beating of your heart resonates with the rhythm of tides. The choices of one person ripple outward in ways unseen, shaping destinies of others far beyond their awareness. The hidden structure reveals that separateness is an illusion, that beneath the boundaries of skin, nation, and identity, everything is already fused in a greater whole. To awaken to this theme is to recognize that your life is not a solitary event, but a chord in a vast symphony. At the heart of the architecture lies the principle of pattern. Reality is written in repetition. The Fibonacci spirals in seashells reappear in galaxies. The branching veins of leaves echo the branching of rivers and lungs. Even human lives follow cycles of growth, decay, and renewal, mirroring the seasons that cradle the earth. These patterns are not coincidences, but signatures of the same underlying mathematics of existence. They whisper that reality is not random chaos, but a rhythm, a dance whose choreography can be read if you know how to listen. The ancients called it sacred geometry, a code inscribed in the bones of creation, suggesting that the universe is not merely matter and energy, but also meaning, order, and design. Closely tied to pattern is the concept of duality. The architecture of reality is built upon the tension of opposites, light and shadow, creation and destruction, movement and stillness. These dualities are not enemies but partners, generating balance through their interaction. Without darkness, light could not be seen. Without silence, music would have no shape. Without limitation, freedom would lose its power. To ignore this is to misunderstand the structure itself. The hidden architecture does not promise a world without struggle or pain. It shows, instead, that every struggle is part of a larger harmony, that every ending hides the seed of a beginning. To see duality not as conflict, but as complement is to begin to walk through the architecture with new eyes. Consciousness itself is another cornerstone. The hidden structure of reality does not merely exist outside of us, it runs through us, shaping and being shaped by the mind that perceives it. What you believe, what you expect, what you hold as possible, these are not idle thoughts, but architectural lines drawn into the invisible blueprint. The observer is not separate from the observed. The act of awareness bends the structure itself. This is perhaps the most unsettling and liberating truth, that reality is not something you passively inhabit, but something you co-create, continuously and unconsciously. To awaken to this is to realize that your thoughts, your focus, your very state of being, are bricks and beams in the architecture itself. Another recurring theme is the veil of forgetting. Most of us enter life with the hidden architecture erased from memory, as though we were handed a magnificent palace, but told only to sit in the foyer, never to explore the holes. This forgetting allows us to take part in the drama of life with sincerity, to play our roles as though they are absolute. Yet cracks in the veil appear, moments of déjà vu, sudden synchronicities, overwhelming awe that remind us there is more beyond the hallway we've been confined to. These glimpses are not mistakes. They are the architecture itself, whispering, beckoning us deeper, reminding us that the ordinary world is not the whole world. And then there is the theme of alignment. To live blindly, unaware of the deeper structure, is to move against the grain, like a hand brushing against rough wood. Life feels harsh, resistant, filled with friction. But to align with the architecture, to sense its rhythms, its cycles, its geometries, to move with the current rather than against it. In such moments, effort dissolves into flow, sync, multiply, and what once seemed impossible falls into place, as though reality itself were cooperating. Alignment does not mean control. It means harmony, recognition that the architecture is not a prison but a guide. All of these themes, illusion and truth, interconnectedness, pattern, duality, consciousness, forgetting, and alignment form the pillars of the hidden structure. They are not mere abstractions but the scaffolding behind every experience you've ever had. The architecture is not distant or theoretical. It is here, now, in every breath, every encounter, every choice. To ignore it is to walk blind through a cathedral without ever looking up at the ceiling, never realizing you are surrounded by beauty, meaning, and depth. To begin to see it is to awaken from a long sleep into a world both familiar and utterly transformed. And so we stand at the edge of the deeper exploration. Having outlined the themes and concepts, the question arises: how do we step beyond abstractions and glimpse this architecture in ways that speak not only to the mind but to the soul? To do so, we must enter the realm of symbol, story, and metaphor, where truths too vast for literal description are woven into narrative. Through these symbolic journeys, the hidden architecture reveals itself not as cold theory but as living myth, vibrating with meaning. Symbols are the language of the hidden architecture, for reality does not speak to us only in equations or logical explanations. It whispers in archetypes, images, and stories that reach past the intellect and into the marrow of being. To explore the architecture at its deeper levels is to enter a mythic landscape where allegory becomes a map, where truth is hidden in the folds of story, and where the unseen reveals itself in shapes we can feel rather than dissect. These symbolic narratives are not just fictions, they are reflections of the universal patterns we explored earlier. Metaphors written in the cosmic script of human imagination. Consider first the allegory of the labyrinth. From ancient myths of Crete to medieval cathedrals, the labyrinth has been a recurring image of the human journey. To step into the labyrinth is to step into life itself, a winding, often confusing path where each turn feels final, yet always leads deeper inward. Many spend their lives lost in its corridors, mistaking the walls for limits, despairing at dead ends. Yet the hidden architecture is encoded into the labyrinth's design. What seems like chaos is actually order. What feels like aimless wandering is, in truth, an intricate path spiraling toward the center. And in that center lies the mystery, not a monster to be slain, but the self, unveiled at last. The labyrinth reminds us that life's detours, struggles, and setbacks are not signs of failure but necessary turns in a greater design. It teaches us that the architecture is not linear but cyclical, pulling us inward toward awakening through the very act of apparent wandering. Then there is the symbol of the mirror. On the surface, a mirror is a simple object, reflecting whatever stands before it. But in the hidden architecture, the mirror reveals a profound truth. Reality itself functions as a reflective surface. What you carry within your fears, your desires, your beliefs returns to you as experience. People you meet, events that unfold, challenges that arise, all mirror the architecture of your inner world. This is why two individuals can walk through the same external circumstances and live entirely different realities. One sees betrayal where another sees freedom. One sees loss where another sees rebirth. The mirror is merciless but also merciful. It does not punish, it reflects, showing you where you are aligned with the deeper design and where you are not. To understand life as mirror is to realize that the hidden architecture is not separate from you but constantly conversing with you, echoing back your state of being until you awaken. Another ancient symbol is the tree, found in mythologies from the Norse Yggdrasil to the biblical tree of life. The tree is more than vegetation, it is a living metaphor for the architecture itself. Its roots dig deep into the unseen soil, anchoring it in the invisible realm, while its branches stretch toward the heavens, reaching for light. The trunk unites both worlds, bridging the hidden with the revealed, the underground with the sky. Humanity, too, is like this tree rooted in mystery, stretching toward transcendence, living in the in-between. The tree teaches that the hidden architecture is not somewhere far away but within our very existence. Invisible roots feeding visible branches, unseen structures sustaining visible life. When you touch a tree, you touch a living model of reality itself. The river is yet another archetype, flowing endlessly from source to sea, winding through landscapes, carving valleys, shaping worlds. To see the river is to understand time and experience. We imagine ourselves as separate drops of water, carried helplessly by the current, yet the hidden architecture reveals otherwise. Every drop is the river, every moment connected to the source and to the destination. The bends and rapids are not accidents, but expressions of terrain. Just as your struggles are expressions of the landscape of your soul, the river teaches surrender not as defeat, but as trust in the larger flow. It whispers that resistance is the root of suffering, while alignment allows you to move effortlessly toward your destiny. Then there is the symbol of the veil, perhaps the most important of all. The veil represents the thin, delicate layer that separates the visible world from the hidden one. It is the curtain of illusion, the boundary of perception, the fragile film between waking and dreaming. In myth, the veil appears as the curtain of the temple, as the shroud between life and death, as the fog that clouds the eyes of the unawake. To live beneath the veil is to take shadows for substance. But every so often, the veil parts through awe, tragedy, love, or silence, and one glimpses the architecture beneath. To see past the veil, even for an instant, is to know that the world you took for solid is, in fact, woven of threads of light and meaning. The veil reminds us that reality is layered, and that awakening is not about destroying the world you know, but seeing through it to what lies beyond. Each of these symbols, the labyrinth, the mirror, the tree, the river, the veil carries within it echoes of the hidden architecture. They are not arbitrary inventions of imagination, but recurring motifs across cultures and centuries, as though humanity itself has always sensed the deeper design, encoding it in story and myth so that it would not be lost. When we encounter them, whether in ancient texts or in the quiet symbolism of daily life, something within us stirs, recognizing a truth we cannot quite articulate but deeply feel. And this is the essence of symbolic narrative. It bypasses the rigid intellect and speaks directly to the inner knowing. It awakens memory, not of facts but of patterns, not of explanations but of recognition. To engage with these stories is to practice seeing with more than the eyes, listening with more than the ears. It is to tune into the architecture not as a distant abstraction but as a living presence surrounding you at every moment. If the architecture could speak in words, it might overwhelm. But in symbols, it offers hints, fragments, invitations. It does not shout its truth. It whispers through stories, nudging us toward realization without force. And as you gathered these whispers through labyrinths walked, mirrors faced, trees observed, rivers followed, veils glimpsed, you begin to build an inner language for navigating the unseen. You begin to live not as someone lost in a flat world, but as one attuned to the cathedral of hidden design all around you. It is one thing to marvel at symbols, to contemplate labyrinths, trees, rivers, and veils, and to feel the stirring of recognition within. But if the hidden architecture of reality remains only an abstract fascination, then it has not yet fulfilled its purpose. The true power of these revelations lies in integration, allowing the awareness of deeper structures to flow into the way you live, the way you choose, and the way you perceive the unfolding of your own story. The architecture is not meant to be worshipped from afar. It is meant to be lived. Integration begins with perception. When you understand that reality functions like a mirror, you start to pay attention to what life is reflecting back to you. Instead of blaming circumstances or projecting responsibility onto others, you begin to see each experience as an invitation to self-recognition. A difficult encounter becomes more than just conflict. It becomes a lesson, a mirror showing you where your inner architecture may be misaligned. A moment of synchronicity is no longer dismissed as coincidence. It becomes confirmation that you are walking in resonance with the deeper pattern. By treating life as an active dialogue with the architecture, you cultivate awareness that every event, whether joyful or painful, is imbued with meaning. This awareness naturally shifts how you approach choice. If consciousness is one of the pillars of the architecture, then what you believe, focus on, and expect is not a trivial detail, it is a shaping force. To live unconsciously is to allow fear, habit, and cultural programming to design your reality for you. To live consciously is to participate in the design, to recognize that the stories you tell yourself become the walls and windows of your lived experience. Integration, therefore, involves becoming a careful architect of thought, not in the sense of controlling every idea, but of recognizing the power of attention. To dwell endlessly on scarcity is to strengthen scarcity in your life. To cultivate gratitude and possibility is to strengthen those patterns in the architecture you inhabit. This does not mean that suffering disappears, nor that challenges evaporate. The architecture is built on duality, and thus both light and shadow are necessary. But integration shifts the way you engage with difficulty. Rather than seeing struggle as punishment or random misfortune, you begin to view it as part of the larger design, an opportunity to grow in alignment with a deeper order. When a river bends sharply, the water does not resist its curves, adapts, and continues its flow. To live in alignment with the architecture is to learn this same grace, to bend without breaking, to recognize that even obstacles can redirect you toward a truer path. Practical integration also involves rhythm. The architecture moves in cycles: day and night, seasons, birth and death, expansion and contraction. Yet modern life often teaches us to resist these rhythms, to expect constant productivity, constant upward growth, constant availability. This friction creates exhaustion and disconnection, for it places us at odds with the natural architecture of reality. By honoring rhythm, by resting when rest is called for, by planting seeds in the right season, by allowing endings to give way to beginnings, you align with the flow rather than against it. Such alignment may seem subtle, but it profoundly shifts how life feels. Less like an endless battle, more like a dance with a partner who already knows the steps. Another practical dimension lies in relationships. If the architecture is a web of interconnectedness, then every interaction is not isolated, but part of the greater weave. To recognize this is to treat others not as separate entities floating in their own sealed bubbles, but as reflections, teachers, and co-creators in your journey. Compassion arises naturally when you understand that harming another is ultimately harming the web you are also a part of. Likewise, acts of kindness ripple outward in ways unseen, echoing through the architecture far beyond what you can measure. Integration here means living with awareness of impact, recognizing that the architecture records not only thoughts and choices, but also the energy you pour into the world. The hidden structure also calls us to live with greater courage. If the veil of reality is not absolute, if limits are not as solid as they appear, then much of what holds us back is illusion. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy. These are not iron walls but chalk lines on the floor. To live in awareness of the architecture is to see those fears for what they are, shadows mistaken for substance. Courage, then, is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let illusion dictate destiny. It is the willingness to step forward, even when the veil has not yet parted, trusting that alignment will reveal the path as you move. Perhaps most importantly, Practical integration brings a shift in identity. You begin to see yourself not as a passive traveler in a fixed world, but as both a participant and a co-creator in the unfolding design. The architecture does not place you at its mercy, it invites you into its rhythm. This shift is subtle yet transformative. When you no longer see yourself as powerless, you begin to act with greater intention, to live with deeper presence, to create with more authenticity. You begin to realize that the same patterns that sculpt mountains and guide rivers are also at work within you. And this is the quiet revolution the hidden architecture offers. It does not ask you to abandon the ordinary world, but to see it differently, to live it differently. The grocery store, the conversation with a stranger, the morning ritual of these ordinary events are portals into the extraordinary. When viewed through the lens of deeper structure, the hidden architecture does not demand escape into some distant realm. It invites presence in this one. Presence so deep that even the smallest detail glows with significance. To live with this awareness is not to become detached from the world, but to engage with it more fully. You feel the rhythm in your work, the mirror in your relationships, the cycles in your own growth. You recognize the labyrinthine nature of your journey and trust its winding design. You sense the veil but do not fear it, knowing that glimpses beyond it are part of the journey. In this way, the architecture becomes not just a philosophy but a lived practice, one that shapes your choices, your relationships, and the meaning you draw from every moment. Every exploration must eventually arrive at its still point, the place where understanding settles into the marrow and becomes not just something thought about, but something lived. Having walked through the introduction, traced the guiding themes, wandered through symbolic narratives, and drawn the threads into everyday life, we now stand at the threshold of the conclusion. Yet in truth, this is not an ending but an invitation to step into the hidden architecture of reality, not as a distant concept, but as a living truth within your own existence. The architecture has always been here, waiting. It was here before you were born, and it will continue long after your final breath. It does not depend on belief, nor does it vanish when ignored. Like the foundations of a cathedral buried beneath the floor, it quietly upholds the structure of your life, whether you acknowledge it or not. But awareness transforms the relationship. To live unconsciously within the architecture is to wander as a guest who never looks up, who never sees the beauty etched in the ceiling above. To awaken is to realize you have always been both guest and builder, participant and creator, shaping and being shaped by the design. This realization carries a responsibility. If reality mirrors your inner state, then every thought, every intention, every action becomes part of the weaving. You cannot remain indifferent once you see this. For you understand that your private storms ripple outward, and your quiet kindnesses ripple outward too. Your life ceases to be an isolated event, and becomes a thread in a tapestry, a note in a symphony, a movement in a dance far larger than yourself. And once you know you are part of this dance, the question becomes, how will you move? The call of the hidden architecture is not a call to escape the world, but to transform your way of seeing it. It is a call to look at your struggles, not as meaningless burdens, but as necessary turns in the labyrinth. It is a call to see every person you encounter as both a reflection and a teacher, reminding you of who you are and who you could become. It is a call to recognize that the seasons of your life, with their rises and falls, are not failures but rhythms, guiding you through cycles of becoming. And above all, it is a call to remember that the veil is thin, that the walls around you are not as solid as they appear, and that at any moment, you can glimpse the infinite beyond. What, then, does transformation look like? It does not always look like lightning bolts or revelations. Sometimes it looks like small choices made with awareness. It looks like pausing before reacting, asking what the mirror is showing you. It looks like trusting the river when you cannot see its end. It looks like aligning with cycles rather than fighting them, resting when rest is needed, acting when the moment calls. It looks like courage, the willingness to walk through the veil of fear, knowing it is thinner than it appears. Transformation is not the abandonment of ordinary life, but the infusion of ordinary life with extraordinary awareness. And yet, there is also a greater daring hidden in this call. To live in alignment with the architecture is to reclaim your role as a conscious creator. It is to acknowledge that your attention shapes reality, that your beliefs sketch the lines of the blueprint, and that your choices ripple into the wider web. This is not an invitation to arrogance, but to responsibility, to humility before the vast design, and to courage in your part within it. To awaken to the architecture is to awaken to your power, not the shallow power of control, but the deeper power of harmony, the power of one who has found their place in the pattern and dares to live fully from it. The hidden architecture of reality is not a secret meant to remain hidden. It is a truth that waits for each of us to remember, to uncover, to live. They may never have told you, but now you have seen glimpses, and once glimpsed, it cannot be forgotten. The labyrinth cannot be mistaken for chaos once you recognize its spiral design. The mirror cannot be ignored once you know it reflects your inner world. The tree cannot be dismissed once you feel its roots in mystery and its branches in light. The river cannot be feared once you trust its flow. The veil cannot hold forever once you realize it is only a veil. So here, at the end of this journey, the transformational call is simple. Look again. Look at your life not as random, not as powerless, not as disconnected, but as part of the hidden design. Begin with awareness, and let awareness ripple into choice. Begin with choice, and let choice ripple into transformation. Begin with transformation, and let transformation ripple into the lives of others, until the architecture itself begins to shine more clearly through the collective awakening. The hidden architecture of reality is not somewhere else. It is here, in this very breath, in the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the patterns of your relationships, in the vast sky above you, and the soil beneath your feet. It has always been here, and now, you are invited to live as one who sees. Step into it, trust it, align with it, become part of its beauty, its rhythm, its wonder. For once you awaken to the hidden architecture of reality, you will never live blindly again.